For those who aren't into graphic novels yet, it's about time to start reading them. You have no idea how important graphic novels are in literature because there are artists out there that could never have their own television series, make their own animated movie, or have their own comic book series to run. And where do these artists look up to when they can't have any success in the animation business? Creating a graphic novel has so much freedom as to writing a novel. All you just need is a publisher to get your work to the public. I heavily got into graphic novels when I realized that Persepolis the film was based on a graphic novel, and I was surprised that there were many personal stories like Persepolis. Throughout the 2000s, cartoonists have made personal stories into autobiographical graphic novels such as Jerusalem, Chronicles of the Holy City, The Kampung Boy, Cuba, My Revolution, and so many more. If it's your first time hearing that there are many autobiographical graphic novels, you should really check these out because these are real-life stories that I've never seen before. But the one I'm reviewing right now is actually my favorite graphic novel of all time, and it's Craig Thompson's Blankets. Nothing in my mind could ever be a greater example of a masterpiece that has so much heart, hard work, and dedication that has ever been printed. But most of all, this is a story that I relate to the most. It's told by the story of Craig Thompson's life from his childhood to where is he now today. And just reading Blankets is such a deep tale of a man's struggle of keeping his faith in Christianity while facing the harsh reality known as his life. Now this is going to be a different review than what I normally do because in this review I'm going to be talking more about the story. Don't worry, I won't get into any spoilers, just giving you the basic principles of what you should know about the story, and I'll stop in the middle of the story. The childhood of Craig Thompson was not an easy one to go through because he was a wimpy kid that had really strict conservative Christian parents that weren't rich, and all the kids from his school bullied him brutally. In the first chapter of the graphic novel, we witness Craig and his younger brother Phil struggling to get along together, but can't seem to agree with each other and fought so many times. The hardest part about seeing them grow up is that they have to share the same bed because their parents can't afford another mattress. But the hardest part of all is seeing their parents disciplining them in the harshest way that it's really hard to see whether or not they really do love their children. But what's even worse than the fighting at home was Craig's conflict with everyone in school. His teacher hardly has any concern for him, and he's too weak to stand up against the bullies that gave him the worst insults and gave him numerous beatings. It was hard to see Craig's life for the first couple of chapters because the life that he lived in was so harsh that his only enjoyment in life was watching cartoons and draw. And judging by his artwork that Thompson has made in Blankets, you can really tell that he has a passion of doing this, and possibly does this for a living for escapism. It also examines his life believing that what he was taught in church and Sunday school about Christianity, and at times when he has the hardest days, he would pray to be in heaven. But what makes it hard to keep his faith was that none of his prayers were answered. The usage of sympathy was the best tone of the story because as we continue reading the graphic novel, you wish the best for Craig, and you know what? That soon is about to happen because we as Christians say God works in mysterious ways. Every winter break, Craig had to go to a ski trip with the Christian youth camp. What's messed up is that the kids in church camp were also his bullies. The most unbelievable thing about the story is that the bullies were also Christians, and they laugh and curse at him for even bringing his Bible. The one thing that really struck me was when Craig Thompson wrote that God blessed other kids for having social skills and athletic graces, which he himself lacks. Like I said, he was forced to go every year, but he only likes going there because it was less of a lonely place for him. Now this is where Craig's life changed for the better because one year when he went to Christian camp in his high school, he actually made friends from out of town in the church camp who didn't want to ski or snowboard that actually stood up to the bullies, and he actually found his first love. The girl's name was Raina, and meeting her for the first time actually changed Craig's life around, and boy did it ever at this point of the story, changing it from a somber story filled with darkness into a romantic story that brightened us with a holy light. Craig doesn't know how to react to a girl who's interested in him, and throughout his shy life, it was about time to beam like a cannon. Through their time in ski trip, they often meet each other and snuck out of campus and did so many things together that was absolutely romantic. She taught Craig how to stand up for himself and actually taught him how to be more brave. Raina was a really strong person, breaking rules and actually talking back at supervisors. But they couldn't stay in church camp forever and had to part their ways on the day that they all had to go back home. The problem, however, is that Craig and Raina lived so far away from each other. After Craig came back home, he began sending letters to Raina back and forth to keep contact with each other. This was the early 90s, and there was no social network around. They both fell more and more in love with each other each time they wrote back. Craig's parents knew about Raina, but they assumed that they were only friends, and Craig wanted them to believe that so that he can see her again. It was about time to see her again because Raina was having family problems at home and she doesn't know whom else to talk to. Craig asked permission to see Raina and spend time with her throughout the winter break. At first his mother didn't approve, but when Craig told her that her family was Christian, ironically she changed her mind. Around the Christmas break, he was able to spend 2 weeks with Raina and her family. Her father knew about the relationship between the two, but didn't mind at all because he was already going through a divorce and he doesn't want to make anything worse for his daughter. Arriving at their home, Craig was given his own guest room and he met the entire family. Boy, weren't they an interesting family because Raina had an older sister who just had a baby and 2 adopted siblings, a mentally handicapped sister who really likes to play with Craig, and a stuck-up brother who didn't like him to begin with. Raina's father was the most friendly out of the bunch, and the mother was too stubborn to even communicate with the family. Arriving at their home, the best part was Raina's present to Craig, which is the reason why this whole graphic novel is called Blankets. What's interesting about Blankets is that most of the story is being told in Craig's experience with Raina's family and how much he was concerned for them. I was fine with this direction of the story, not just because the romance between him and Raina is so incredible to watch, but also how did this broken family unite because of Craig's visit. It was like having a new family member that actually gave them a purpose to be a family once again. During Craig's stay, he also had to resist his temptation of having sex because they were so madly in love. Just seeing each other was so romantic and so beautiful to read. The words that they say to each other, the activities they have done, and even learning about their world was nothing more than consistent and breathtaking. This is some of the best romance stories I've ever seen, and it wasn't lighthearted nor did it play safe. But best of all is when they finally decided to sleep with each other, behind everyone's backs. Now, this is where I have to stop telling you guys the story because from here on out, you gotta get yourself a copy of this graphic novel because it's so beautiful and so tragic that I can't even describe in words. Hell, why should I spoil some of the best things that has ever been published? What made this such a great read is that the artwork, yet it has a cartoony dark feel to it, has a lot of magic and creativity. Craig Thompson's style illustrates the dark, gloomy world through his handwriting was really mesmerizing to see. Very often it transcends from a particular memory of Craig's into an imagination or a thoughtful dream. Most of the time when there's a situation that brings back a memory, like when Craig was resisting temptation of having sex, he was reminded about the time his parents found out about Craig's drawing of a naked woman and had a serious talk with him about using your talents from God and not use them for the devil. How about that one moment when he woke up in Raina's bed and saw a picture of Jesus Christ smiling at him for not having sex? These were all thoughts that real people actually think about, and I praise Craig Thompson for being so open when he tells us about his life because no other story has ever done this before. This is not filler. These were all things that we get to know Craig Thompson as a person. It's not just Craig's story alone, but it's also the people that he loved, like his mother keeping her sons pure and how much of a grump his father is. And Raina as his first love, you can already tell from the cover of this graphic novel that he still is in love with her, and you have to see for yourself where the relationship is today. There were so many dramatic and tragic things that act so realistically, unlike other romantic stories that ends with the two of them living happily ever after. Nothing was held back in the story. It examined sex, growing up into a man, keeping faith with your religion, and what do you think about the people who are also believing in the same religion as you? I mean, Craig was honest about the people in Christianity weren't all so Christian. The biggest example were all the boys from his church and church camp. But since this is a story of a Christian's life, don't be turned off by the Christian and biblical references that Blankets uses, even if Christianity is not your faith, because this story doesn't give Christians a free pass. He showed the flaws and his conflicts with his religion that was so down to earth. What's shocking is that by the end of the graphic novel, spoilers, he's no longer a Christian. I couldn't believe how well made the emotion and the tone of the story is because it told a very dark backstory of Craig's, and when he met Raina, it gave him a purpose to live. I mean, look at the part where Raina's father saw the two sleeping together. It's some of the most emotional visual storytelling I have ever seen. In this very dark story, anything that is at all magical or significant to Craig Thompson somehow brightens the story and it becomes so charming and it brings a lot of hope. With all honesty, the visual storytelling, especially the dream or imagination sequences, it told it so powerfully that it should be considered a sin to think anything negative about blankets. The aspects of this graphic novel are so magical when there are scenes of snow. Remember how wondrous and magical it was to see snow in Fargo? I get the same emotion when I'm looking at the winter aspect of the story. That's so heartwarming. As I said earlier, this is a story that I relate to the most because I too struggled the same flaws and frustration with my own religion. And I'm glad that someone out there, like Craig Thompson, that actually stood up and never held back in telling us about his life. This was such a deep story that I'm glad that was actually told. And you know when I said that I sometimes get teary-eyed when I think about Beyond Good and Evil? Well, I get the same reaction whenever I think of blankets. To this very day, I still wonder how his family thinks about blankets because if I were to make such a graphic novel like Blankets, my folks would definitely kill me. Since the release of Blankets, it received considerable attention to the public that such a story has been told. Critics everywhere recognizes this as the milestone in American graphic novels and is the best form of literature of the decade. Blankets is one of the graphic novels that even furthers my interest with the medium. Reading Blankets is like reliving your youth as you wander through the artist's personal trails of fundamentalist religion and teenage heartbreak in the small town America. The story probably has been told so many times, but Craig Thompson's version is the most honest, warm, and compelling rendition. It's like going home to a close friend and discovering how similar your journeys truly are. Blankets is a masterpiece that I give nothing more and nothing less than a 7 fingers out of 5. This is honestly one of the best things I've ever experienced in this world, and I hold my copy of Blankets so dear in my heart like a baby. I have read this graphic novel so many times that it's always magical whenever I open this graphic novel. It's very adult and very emotional that I can't think of a single thing in this world that can even approach the awesomeness of Blankets. This is a rare instance where I find absolutely no flaws or complaints with such an amazing work of art. I'm telling everyone that if you see a copy of Blankets, I order you to buy it. Buy it at all costs because there isn't a single thing in this world that is as heartwarming, as adult, and as honest as Blankets. You'll never see anything like this in movies, television, and especially video games. It's stories like this that can only be told in graphic novels alone. It doesn't matter what religion or what nationality you're from. Deep down inside, you might think of the same things that you were taught as a child as something that you can't understand why it is, but Blankets somehow is so relatable that it's special. I guarantee to you that reading this piece of art is some of the most magical experience that you'll ever have.